There we go. Hello, everybody. I am glad that you are joining here. Glad that you are joining here. Feel free as you get here to let me know where you're dialing in from, I guess, where you're joining us from, where in the world are you joining us from. And this is one of your first times here. By all means, please just type the word cash flow in the comments. As always, feel free to give hearts for what you like, and likes and comments and shares are always welcome. I am Jay Massey, CEO of CashFlowDiary. I am glad that you guys are here. I see Atlanta, Georgia is in the house, New Jersey. Cashflow, it looks like Berto, first time you're here. Excellent, glad. Hopefully we'll be able to provide some value. Ohio's in the house, big deals, I like it. Chirac. Nice, excellent. For those of you that are just now joining, by all means, let us know where you're coming to us from. I am currently in Southern California today, so that's pretty cool. Chicago, lots of Chicago in the house, it seems, which is great. And we're going to talk about today, at least in this particular session, what we're going to talk about is the number one question, the first question I should say you need to answer to drive that real estate success. I see Minnesota, was that Woodbury, Minnesota, ATL. I see lots of hearts flowing, so that's good. That means you guys have been here before. Again, if this is your first time here, by all means, just go ahead and type the word cash flow so I can give you a quick shout out. And for those of you watching on the replay, I'm glad that you are here and dedicated to learning. So if you're relatively new, you know you got to watch quickly because these videos, they come, they go, and then they're gone, and then you're just like, oh man. So make sure that you're following us. Make sure that you click the little subscribe button or you follow us on Periscope so that you have the ability to be able to make things happen. I love that question, Cato. Hold that question just for 1 second, because I think it's going to be very, very appropriate to exactly why we're talking about. He was asking, how do you flip houses in 24 to 72 hours? And it's interesting that he brought that up. It's interesting to me that he brought that up because oftentimes I'm pummeled with questions. Hello, Sasha. Glad to see you there. And again, if this is your first time here, by all means, type the word cashflow and let us know where you're calling in from. But I get a lot of questions, and I get some of the same ones over and over. Typically, it's how do you find investors? How do I get a deal? And how do I make $5,000 quick? Or some form of those questions all the time. And that's like the first question, because we jump straight to how do I do this X, Y, and Z, as if that's really the answer that we need to actually achieve a result. And that's just not always the case. So again, for those of you just joining us at Jay Massey, I'm going to do my best today to share with you something that I've discovered, learned, and have taught for quite some time in terms of the first question that you need to answer in order to drive real estate investing success. So you said you have property I might be interested in Arizona. I typically don't do anything in Arizona, especially in a single family status or apartments. But you never know. So here's the thing. As I said earlier, we often get pummeled, or at least I get pummeled with the question, how do you find investors? Where can I get a deal? How do I make $5,000 quickly? What it comes down to is, most of the time when we're asking those types of questions, unfortunately, we're thinking mostly about ourselves. We're mostly, those questions are very I-centered, and it's not the way a business owner actually delivers value to the marketplace. And that's the challenge. In order to deliver value to the marketplace, you need to be others-centric. You need to figure out how you can deliver value to other individuals, whatever or wherever those other individuals may or may not be. You can't necessarily think about what you need. And questions like, how do I find investors? How do I flip a house in 24 to 72 hours? Where can I get a deal? Those things, like I said, we get them rather frequently, but it's the wrong way to start your business, in my opinion. The number one question you should be asking, by the way, I've got some notes here that I'm going to show you, so you should be ready to take a number of screenshots today. The number one question you should be asking is actually, who do you want to serve, or whom do you want to serve? I'm not sure if it was who or whom. I'm not sure which was grammatically correct, but I'll let it sit right there so you can take a screenshot real fast. But whom do you want to serve? And what it comes down to, okay, Cato, I see that Cato's saying he wasn't asking for him. And I'm not saying you were. I'm saying that that's a very common question. Being able to transact houses or property in a short time window, yeah, that's an entire strategy. It's how I did like my first 200 transactions. It's totally, can it be done? Absolutely. Can you build a system around it? Absolutely. Can you build a business and do quite well? Absolutely. You can do those things. Absolutely. But it's still, even in that situation, if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, man, I need to earn some cash quick, or, I've got 30, 60, 90 days, so I'm out of money, or what have you. And you're like, man, what do I do? How do I make that happen? It's still the wrong question to be asking first. The best question to be asking first is, whom do you want to serve? Because all other answers that you have for your business flow from that first question. And again, for those of you who may have joined late and didn't get a chance to, it's whom do you want to serve? This is the question you should be asking yourself first. And I underline the word want, right? I underline that word want for a reason, because most of the time we're thinking, well, just who's going to pay me money first, and how quickly can I earn money? That, again, that's the wrong mindset. It's who do you want to serve? Just pretend for a second you are doing this every day, day in, day out. Whom do you want to work with? And what type of properties do you want to be involved with? Those are the things that are way more important than which deal or what strategy is going to earn me the most money today. Because you've already had a job. For most of us, we've already been down the road of being an employee. We didn't like it for a reason, and now you're looking for something slightly different to either augment what you currently have going on, find a way to retirement, build something. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with those things. Or maybe you're just doing it for, personal growth. I see someone talking about assisted living homes. Yes, we actually have inside the CashFlowDiary community a number of people who are doing using real estate in various different ways, from assisted living to short-term housing to obviously apartment buildings, cell phone towers, all kinds of interesting things. But it's centered around whom do you want to serve? Whom do you want to serve? And when you are focused on whom you want to serve first, it's going to give you something that I call clarity, right? It's clarity. Clarity leads to power, the power to decide and act. And that's the challenge. The number one reason a lot of individuals still just want to do real estate and haven't actually managed to get a deal done isn't because they don't have the ability, and it's not because you don't have the money. In fact, I'm going to help you with that as we continue through this particular session right now. It's not because you don't have the money. It's not even because you don't know what you're doing. It's because you don't know who you want to serve, and therefore you're willing to serve everybody. And that's fine, except that it causes mass confusion. Because when it comes down to trying to evaluate a property or look at a deal, you can't tell one good deal from the next. They all look the same. And it's not just and Cato, I like that question. He's talking about where you need to know the target market. Yes, a target market is wonderful, but that doesn't mean that's who you want to serve. Sometimes who you want to serve doesn't necessarily live where you want to play or live where you live. If you want to serve individuals, say for example, you want to serve individuals at resort beach destinations. Now I'm just making that up to prove a point, but you live in the middle of Minnesota. It's not known for resort beach destinations. Neither is Oklahoma. Why? Because there's no resort beach destination in Oklahoma. No one ever says, hey, I'm going to Oklahoma for vacation. Or, well, if they do, I haven't met them. But if you happen to be in Oklahoma and that's what you want to do, the target market, so to speak, or the people surrounding you isn't just about the buildings and the geography, but you got to think people-centric. For whatever reason, real estate entrepreneurs tend to forget that real estate is still about people more than it's about property, because it's the person who's going to use the property that drives the value. And I'll say that again. It's the person who's going to use the property that drives the value. Somebody retype that. The person who's going to use the property drives the value. And when you focus on serving that person, as best as humanly possible, then your property does well. When you don't, it doesn't, and then therefore you don't. Your business doesn't do well. So it's not a matter of just a target market. You have to think, whom do you want to serve? You also have to understand something very, very fundamental. It's not about earning money or what strategy is going to earn you the most money. Have you ever, so let me give you an example of what I mean, and then I'll tell you how it works in real estate. Think about a restaurant, right? If I wanted to open a restaurant and I said to you, hey, let's open a restaurant, one of the first questions you're going to ask me is, okay, what type of food, are you going to serve? Well, I just want to open a restaurant. Well, you're like, well, you got to choose, because you can't serve all the kinds of food, because that's just not going to work. I mean, your menu, your cost, it's going to be too expensive. No one's going to know what they're coming to you for. Exactly. And even if I said I wanted Italian, which, by the way, Italian food's kind of like my favorite. So if I said I wanted an Italian food restaurant, there's still, niches and types of quote unquote Italian food to, how authentic do we really want to go? All of those things matter, but they start with, whom do I want to serve? Not which one makes the most money. And that's what I want you to think about when it comes to real estate. It's not about which one makes the most money. It's about whom do you want to serve. For example, you may have heard me say this before. There are 3 retail stores in the United States: Walmart, Target, and Nordstrom. And all of them make money when they sell shirts, right? So it's not about money, but it's about whom they want to serve. When Walmart sells a shirt, they serve a certain person, and that person gets the shirt, gets the value, and Walmart makes money. When Target does it, the same thing, but it's a different person. When Nordstrom does it, same thing, but it's a different person, and they all sell shirts. Same is true when it comes to real estate investing, but you have to choose, whom do you want to serve? Okay, so this is what I mean. What you can do is decide the type of tenant you want to serve. For example, a type of tenant could be a business owner. Maybe you want to serve a business owner. That's the person you want to serve. Okay, well, that could be a doctor, that could be a retail store, that could be even something like a chiropractor, or just maybe even a government agency or organization. All of those are potential tenants. And you need to be able to respond to that type of tenant's needs appropriately. And you won't develop the proper systems, that's the key here, unless you know whom you want to serve. It's the most important question. It's the one that's not being asked enough, especially when you get started or you go into a new market, etc. You need to be thinking, who do I want to serve here? Who's here? Who do I want to serve? Not who can I serve to get the most money? Well, no. Who do I want to serve? Who am I going to be happy about providing great value to time and time again? Now, speaking of value, there's when it comes to your real estate business in general, understand that there's 3 types of customers that we all have. We have buyers, sellers, and investors. And again, oftentimes people are like, where can I go find the money? How do I get the money? How do I get the money? Where are the investors at? If I just had the funding, Jay, I was actually on a coaching call earlier this week. He's like, all I need is the funding. That's it. That's just all I need. As if someone showed up with a magic pocketbook, that he would automatically have everything that he needed in order to be successful, when that's just still not the case. But finding investors is a systematic process. And that's the thing to understand. Finding the investors is a systematic process. But every real estate business has buyers, sellers, and investors. Buyers, sellers, and investors in some way, shape, or form. And you must manage those resources like a supply chain, just like any other business. If you go to a retail store and you want to buy a television, right? When you go to buy that television, guess what? Well, they procured that television from somewhere. They had a way to get that inventory. They had a supply chain for that. They had a way to get you into the store, i.e. they marketed to you to come to the store to buy that TV. And they had all of that match up at the same time. And they have a system in place to then deliver that, transfer ownership of that television from them to you. or that cell phone, or what, a grocery store. They all do it, and we, as the real estate entrepreneur, do the exact same thing. Buyers, sellers, and investors. Now, the thing to understand is that buyers, sellers, and investors is all about, the buyers and sellers, investors is all about understanding what they value, not what you value, not what you think is great. And I see a number of investors make this mistake as well. They think, well, I think this is great because, and therefore, that's why this is a good deal. Write this down. Value is in the eye of the beholder. Value is in the eye of the beholder. And you need to understand that different people value different things. And when you have that, you are able to go out there and then create value for other individuals. That's really what I'm talking about here. So, and there's three types of value inside of every transaction. There's three types of value. It's another way of saying that any particular piece of real estate can have up to three different prices for it, and all three prices be quote unquote fair. All right. So it can have three different types of prices for it. What does that mean? That means you could have the first type of value is what is known as speculative value. Speculative value. This is very common. This is what you see a lot of people do when you're watching the fix and flip show on television, where they buy something low and they sell it for a little bit more. That's speculating. You're buying something at a lower price and you're hoping to be able to sell it for a little bit more. Wholesaling is a form of speculating. Wholesaling is a form of speculating just as well. So is fixing and flipping, right? That forced appreciation stuff is what we're talking about here. And what is this question? What do you think is the best way to prospect? Got it. The best way to prospect is very, very clear. Just really quickly, the best way to prospect is the system you're actually going to follow through with and actually do consistently. I've seen all things work, and all things. I've seen so many different things work, it doesn't matter. But back to value. There's speculative value. So you're hoping that the price goes up. And as the price goes up, as the value of something increases, then that's how you're going to make money. So someone who is a speculator in that way is going to look at a property or look at a piece of land, is going to look at a building in a completely different way than someone who is looking at it to live there or use it. Use value is another form of value. So you've got speculative as well as use. Speculative as well as use. There's two different valuations right there in and of themselves, and they each result in someone willing to pay a different price. They each result in a way to different for someone to be able to give you more money for it. So Cameron's asking, what's the difference? When I say speculative value, so think of this person isn't going to keep the property. They're buying it, say I'm making up numbers, say you buy a house for $100,000 and you resell it for $150,000. That $50,000 difference is what you were speculating on. However, use value is all about living in that house. That same house that's $100,000, the speculator only wants to spend as little as possible, whereas someone who has use value, would be willing to spend more because they're going to live there. They're like, okay, well, you might only want to spend $100,000 because you're trying to make this $50,000 spread in a short period of time. I plan on living here 7 to 10 years, so I can spend 110, 125, 130, especially once you start adding in the Fannie and Freddie loans and all the subsidized money that they have access to. So that gives them extra ability to pay you more money if that's the house that you have under contract. So speculative versus use value is something to understand. So it's the same property, but because you aren't clear on whom you want to serve, your profit margins are completely different. The third one is investment value. So what does that mean? That means it's going to be driven primarily by the ability for that property to be used by a third party, and you're going to derive your income from there. So it's kind of like the dividends, if you will, when it comes to the stock market. This is their forms of rental income in various different ways. This is how you, again, because I'm looking at this in a completely different way, I'm going to pay a different price for that stream of income than I would pay if I was going to live there or speculate. So, and all three of those determine how much a property could be quote unquote worth to me or you or your buyer, seller, investor at any given moment. And that's what you need to be aware of. Whom do you want to serve is way more important than a comp, is way more important than understanding, target market, as we were talking about earlier. Those things, I'm not saying those things don't matter. They're just, you're asking them in the wrong order. And because you're asking them in the wrong order, you get confused, or confusion happens, and you don't know, is this a good deal? You can't answer that simple question. All right. So the difference between use and investment. There we go. Got it. So I got use and investment. The difference between use, again, this is typically when you're letting a third party use the property, a third party. So you buy a house, you own it, but you rent it out. Maybe you rent it out to seniors, it's a senior assisted living. Maybe you do an Airbnb play. While someone is using the property, they are paying you for the use of that property. That's basically what I'm saying right here. They're paying you for the use of that property. And they're paying you for the use of that property, which is investment value. When I'm saying use value, it's usually you are on title and you are the one using it, or you're an owner occupant. So hopefully that clears it up a little bit. When you're the owner occupant, we're really talking about use value in that sense. And then investment value is when you are the owner, but you're not the occupant at that particular moment. So you're deriving your value from the investment and letting other people use the property. The point is, that should play into how much you're willing to pay for any particular property at any given time. And you need to be aware of exactly that, because that's how you're going to drive value. Value, again, is in the eye of the beholder. Based upon how I view speculative investment and or use value for any particular property will drive exactly how much value there is, how much equity, how much appreciation, how much of whatever it is that you're trying to get done and do is actually going to be present there. Now, as I said, the number of one of the many questions that I often get is, how do I find investors? And I've done a lot of work in helping systematize in the process of helping people be able to raise capital and be able to go out there and find investors. So if you want to take advantage of something I have on special right now that's really, really low price, you've got you can go to CashFlowDiary.com/investors, CashFlowDiary.com/investors, and you'll be able to use that information to go out there and find, investors. That's exactly what it comes down to, is that many times we want to have the ability to find investors. We don't know the process or systems and that we need in order to do so. And that's one of the things that we can do, is to borrow the systems of others that has worked. When you go to that site, you'll see a short little video from one of our students who's been able to raise a significant amount of money so that he can go out there and retire himself at what many would consider a much younger age than some would be able to. But let's recap. What we talked about today is the number one question you need to answer to drive real estate success. That number one question is none other than, whom do you want to serve? Again, oftentimes we start with questions like, how do I find investors? Where do I get a deal? How do I make $5,000 quick this weekend? Those are very valid questions. It's just they're not where you should start. The three types of customers that you have inside your real estate business are buyers, sellers, and investors. Again, buyers, sellers, and investors. Thank you, Connie. And you also need to remember that of those buyers, sellers, and investors, they each view property based on their speculative value, investment value, and or use value. And again, they each go from speculative value, investment value, and or use value. And based upon that speculative investment and or use value, they're going to pay or be willing to invest different dollar amounts. They're going to be willing to contribute in different ways. And so, so they're going to be willing to contribute in different ways. And what it comes down to is we've got to do our best to make sure that we can help them and serve them in every way possible. And again, if you want to begin to learn the process of how to find capital, you can go to cashflowdiary.com/investors, investors, cashflowdiary.com/investors. Stay tuned, because if you want more information like this, obviously, make sure you like the page or subscribe or whatever the button is that they've got today. Make sure you follow us on Periscope. Thanks for the hearts. Totally appreciate that. So that you guys have to, we'll be here, obviously, coming back, so over and over and over again. And it's been fun talking to you guys today. I definitely look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.